You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Overhead Wire, sponsored by our super generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by Han Solo. That's right. Every Wookiee's favorite right-hand man is here today. I'm Han Solo. So as we do when we're Han Solo, let's go over some of the episodes we had and will have on Talking Headways. We have an episode coming up on railroad electrification, coming up with Californians for Electric Rail. That's going to be an interesting episode. Loved recording that one. Kevin Kelly of Shook Kelly is coming, and we'll soon talk about his book Irreplaceable, which I really can't wait for y'all to listen to. We had a really great conversation, and I hope that folks get a kick out of this one because it's not your usual book fare from us. It is an urban planning and urbanism type book, but it's a little bit different. So I hope folks like that. We've got an episode coming up on transit to public parks, which is out on the Impact podcast right now. That'll be coming up in several weeks. We talked to Chris Redfern and Anthony Orlando about a paper that they wrote about urban growth, which I'm really excited to talk about and share with you all. We had one on scooters in Portland that will be on the Impact feed probably this week. So if you want to listen to that one early, that'll be out this week as well, along with our Talking Headways show. Nico Largo is going to come back on the show, and he wrote a book called The Sustainable Urban Design Handbook, which was really great. Lots of really cool stuff in there as well. And we had a fun conversation. It's always great to talk with Nico. And loved his work at the University of Oregon and Urbanism Next and all the stuff he does. Also, we just recorded an episode with Sam Rockwell on Minnesota's really cool highway emissions reduction program for the state DOT. They passed a state law in 2023 and updated it in 2024 so that the state DOT was supposed to reduce VMT, which is really, really interesting. So we've got so many shows, and those are just the ones we've already recorded. I don't know what, like I said last time, I think I have no idea what hit me, but I just kind of went into this show recording binge for some reason. And so we had a couple of weeks where we recorded two, and since we only release one episode a week, it's kind of hard to catch up that way. So we've got those coming out. And then we've also got a lot of shows coming up that I have scheduled. We have shows that I've scheduled all the way into August. And we're keeping on going. So stay tuned also as we keep on going towards that 500th episode. I'm still not quite sure what I'm going to do for it. The 500th episode should be out somewhere around September 19th. I thought it was September 12th, and I totally forgot about the 4th of July. So this last week we had a replay episode because I was actually out. And usually we don't like to release stuff like on Christmas or on the 4th of July or things like that. Because, I know that some of you guys you're going to listen all the time and it's going to be in. But I find that the numbers typically are down then. So it's not fair to the person who came on that week to release it on a holiday to have a little bit lower numbers and then have them pop up back up the week after. So I did a replay with Alex Gouldworth and Alex Murphy and discussing on their work on transportation insecurity. As I mentioned at the start of the show on that one, Anna Zevarts mentioned the work in her book recently. And so it was good to chat with them. So yeah, we've got some really good stuff coming up, and it's all that the ones I've mentioned are all recorded. So I'm really looking forward to you all hearing them. We've got a lot more to go, and we're just going to keep going until we get 500. So and thanks to everybody who came out to hang out with us at the happy hour the other day with Seamless Bay Area. That was really fun to see folks right before the holiday, and I'm super glad folks came out to see the folks at Seamless, but also came out because you listened to this show. And so really great to meet everybody that was there and chat. And then also I got rid of some scarves, so hope folks really enjoyed those as well. And thanks to everybody who's been ordering bike and bus scarves. We got rid of 5 of them the other day at the happy hour, which was good. And if you'd like to order one, go to theoverheadwire.com or email me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. Ask for a discount and I'll figure something out for you. And as we always note, to really thank everybody for supporting the show, whether that's on patreon.com/theoverheadwire, buying books off the bookshop site. Folks have been really liking Megan Kimball's book City Limits. That's on top of our charts. Bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire. Or folks have been ordering Cars Are Cholesterol. Actually, not as many t-shirts, but they've been ordering stickers, which is really cool. So whatever merch you can dream up and TeePublic has, you can make with the Cars Are Cholesterol logo, designed by Richard Wazensky of Dick David Sketches on Instagram. So check his work out too, bit.ly/Cars Are Cholesterol. We also strongly suggest that folks sign up for the newsletter if you get a chance. We'll chat about that in a bit too. But also, as we always mentioned, listening to the show helps. Listening in and hearing what we have to say is really great. I can't believe that you all are still listening after all these years, but listening to the ads helps as well. And just, being here for us and when you see those numbers come up, it makes me happy that people are still here and listening to the show. There's a lot of you, so I appreciate that too. And then, so thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for, hanging in there. This is episode 155. We're live together and in session. I think, as I've mentioned the last 3 times, Chrissy is supposed to be here, but she'll be here next time. She had a conflict again this week. And, if you're busy and you're working and you have a real job to do, aside from come on podcasts, then I think it's probably better to go do your job rather than come on the show. And so hopefully we'll get Chrissy in next time. I also have a list of folks that I know that want to come on the show and hang out with us from the past and the future. And so we'll get folks on soon as well over the next few months. Yeah. So before we get to the show, I want to let folks know that they can get this podcast and Talking Headways wherever you find podcasts: iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Apple Podcasts. We're also on YouTube. Check us out there if you get a chance. I keep on getting these emails from all these marketing people that are like, your SEO on YouTube is only 10% of what it should be. And I'm like, that's not, YouTube isn't my jam. Maybe at some point it will be. But we do post the show there. So folks are listening there. I really appreciate you listening on YouTube. But it's not something I've focused on. And I'm not really worried about the SEO of YouTube at the moment. But thank you for hanging out there on YouTube with us, even though it's just the audio of this show. But yeah, everywhere else you can get your podcast too, and then walk around. I don't quite understand how YouTube works in terms of podcasts. I know people listen to that and don't watch anything. They just listen to podcasts and audio and stuff and walk around. But I know that for me on my phone, I think something happens where if I put my phone in my pocket and the screen turns off, the YouTube turns off. And so, I've tried to do that before, but it doesn't really work for something that only shows up on YouTube. So who knows? Anyways, we're on YouTube. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on all those places, Spotify, iHeartRadio, etc. Check it out if you get a chance. Okay, so let's talk about the news. Here are a few stories that piqued our interest from the newsletter over the last few weeks. Since it was the 4th of July holiday last week, there is a little bit less news, but that's good because, we'll get through it pretty quickly, relatively. You know me, I like to talk about stuff, so we'll have a pretty good episode, but it may not be 50 minutes like maybe the last couple ones were. But there's a number of things to talk about, a number of things I'm going to kind of shy away from because I'm not an expert on them, and I didn't want to go into too much detail on them, especially since I haven't quite gone into detail to think about them really hard. I know that they're bad Supreme Court rulings and things like that, but I wanted to acknowledge that they exist, but also that I haven't thought as hard about them as I should because I've been busy doing other things and can't always sit down and read all the details. But we'll go into that in a second. I do want to note that I've appreciated all the folks that are signing up for the newsletter. Thank you very much. It's been going since 2006. We go through 1,500 items a day to pull out the best ones for you all who are subscribers to the newsletter. If you get the premium version, you get about 40 to 50 items a day, and they're all kind of in a way to read it really quickly. So I do 8 hours of work a day, so you all only have to do 10 minutes of scanning. And we've got we're working on a website that is going to update some of that stuff. And so it's going to make it easier to look at the archives as well. We've got over 100,000 items in the archive since we started recording the archive back in 2013. It would probably be even way more than that if we went back to 2006, maybe 200,000, 250,000 by then. But we've got 100,000 items. They're all tagged by topic and city. And so if you want access to that, go to theoverheadwire.com and sign up for the newsletter. And if you don't want to pay for the newsletter, and that's fine, that's something that, people have Substacks and stuff where they're free versions and things like that. Actually, we're on Substack too now, and I'll talk about that later. But I do want to say we have a basic version. So if you take a free trial and you're not interested in paying for it, you'll go to the basic version where you only get 1 article per segment a day. And some people really like that because it's like a quick kind of overview of a couple of things that's going on that might be different than everywhere else that's talking about things. I must say our newsletter is a little bit different in that we just kind of share stuff that I think is super interesting, off the wall. It's not going to be the same stuff. It's not going to be the Supreme Court stuff all the time. It's not going to be the stuff that's thrown in your face by the general media. We're going to find the stuff in the details. And it's funny because people have asked me, they're like, isn't AI or isn't large language models or those types of things, aren't those going to take away your job, or isn't that going to going to make your job harder. And yes, it makes my job harder because Google is starting to suck because of AI. I will say that. But one of the things that I do, and I do better than any language model would ever do, or any intelligence that thinks it's intelligent would ever do, is that I find the little things in the corners that no model would pick up because it's interesting and it's outside the realm of other ideas. So I'm going in and finding news items that might be really interesting from a small niche around the corner. It might be in a big publication, but it's not going to be found in if I'm searching for a certain keyword term. So I find those little things and I bring them to folks that read the newsletter, and I hope folks appreciate that. And then what I do is I share them here on the Monday show. So let's get into stuff because you're tired of hearing me talking about shop, right? So let's get started. First off, SCOTUS results, Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court of the United States released several decisions last week that are likely to impact regulation and governance of urban spaces going forward, including how federal agencies regulate, upending things like the Chevron doctrine, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of lately if you're dialed into the news. The Chevron doctrine says that federal agencies have expertise. That got shut down, and the court system just gave themselves a ton more power. And the decision Neil Gorsuch discussed expertise in was really funny because he actually messed up the emissions type that he was talking about. He's like, we have expertise to talk about greenhouse gas emissions, and then he wrote about laughing gas instead of nitrogen oxides, which are pollutants created by vehicle exhaust and other things. So apparently, Neil, you are not the expert at these things, which is really frustrating that the Supreme Court thinks they're experts at all these things. And it's annoying because I see this all the time in like newspaper reporting, right? Like everybody here listening to this show with me, you all have expertise in something, right? You have spent your life or your time learning things about transportation, about urban planning, about Star Wars, about whatever it may be. You have expertise in some specific topic area, cabinetry, whatever it may be, bus driving. And you have a lifetime of experience at that. And then you read a news article about your topic and it's totally wrong, or there's something missing, or there's something annoying about it that is really nagging at you because they missed the whole point. And so I feel that that's the case with like people who come in and say we'll adjudicate this, we'll understand it better than you will because we're from the outside. Well, sometimes people on the inside know better because they've been doing it for such a long time. You know, there's policy prescriptions and things like that. But as I said, I'm not going to go too much into detail about the Supreme Court stuff, but I think it's really important to kind of share that idea about that specific thing, the court case that brought about the fall of the Chevron doctrine. Also, there was Grants Pass versus Johnson, in which the court majority found that cities can prohibit sleeping outside. And, you know, while in dissent, the liberal justices said that, the majority is actually criminalizing sleep. That was these two articles. There's one in, I think it's a New Republic and Governing. I'll share them in the show notes. Again, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to go into too much of the details, but I wanted to share that these two opinions exist and they're out there and they're going to, have an impact on urban transportation and planning issues. But I don't know if I can go into them in detail yet because I don't know if I have like all of I'm not going to talk off the cuff on them because they're so important. But I do want to share that they exist. So anyways, I'm going to just go forward with the next stuff. That's the transportation and urban planning stuff that we're used to. Next up, traffic noise in children's brains. Noise pollution has impacts on children's health, particularly urban transportation noise, which is the dominant source of noise pollution in both the United States and the European Union. Studies show that children's cognitive function at important development stages can be impacted, particularly outside of places of learning. The best solution? Reducing vehicle traffic near schools. This was by Olivia Howitt in BBC Future. So there's all these studies and stuff that show that noise and loud sounds and things outside of places of learning actually impact the way that children learn. And I can understand that. I mean, I'm sitting in a place where there's a lot of banging going on lately. And over the last several years, there's been a lot of like concrete jackhammering and things like that, or building as they redo a bunch of houses on the street. And I can tell you, it really impacts my ability to focus. And I can't imagine if you're trying to learn something, trying to sit down like a kid and having all this traffic noise outside and trying to learn the ABCs or whatever it may be. So I can understand this. And also, one of the things that we've done over time here in the United States, at least, is make people not walk to school. Parents drive to school. You also build these schools in areas where there's on an arterial road or they're by something else that makes a lot of noise. And so I think that can have probably an impact on learning, and you need a quiet space in order to learn. And so it's shown that children's brains are impacted by traffic noise, and this study does that. And check out the link if you want to read more about it. It's really super interesting. Cities have overbuilt retail spaces. Even before the pandemic, retail vacancies were high, but they've continued increasing in part because of the convenience of online shopping, empty offices in downtowns, and landlords that sit on properties waiting for perfect tenants. But Leah Brooks and Rachel Meltzer argue that there's a more fundamental driver of high retail vacancies, the over-allocation of space for retail and municipal land use regulations. This was by Leah Brooks and Rachel Meltzer in Slate. So this is something that's been talked about in urbanism circles for a long time, is like, you want to be like Jane Jacobs. You want to activate the space. You want eyes on the street. So you're going to put some urban retail with large glass fronts for the windows, and you're going to make sure that all those spaces could eventually be some sort of retail in the future. And there's also this argument that I've seen not just here, but over the last decade or so, that we've overbuilt it. We've actually created spaces that have too much retail, and so a lot of it's empty. And especially now that brick and mortar stores are having a tougher time because of online retailing, you see that a lot of the shops are sitting empty instead of getting tenants, or like they say in the article, they're waiting for a perfect tenant. And so there's places outside of my house here in Noe Valley that there's been nothing going on for a long time. The one on the corner of my street actually has been empty since, I think, way before the pandemic. And, at the start of the pandemic, there wanted to be a cannabis shop, but that actually didn't work out. So what ended up happening is it's sitting empty. And so there's a part of me that wants to put like a train in there or something, like a Lionel train set, and just have, because it's beautiful space and it's got big windows and it's really nice, but it doesn't really function as a retail space because the owners are sitting there waiting for their $8,000 a month payday, and I just don't see how that's possible to get that kind of rent in the way things are going now, especially when you can go closer to Whole Foods and get closer to kind of the 100% corner and get more foot traffic. There's really just not as much foot traffic this side of Church Street. And so I think that's frustrating, is that we see all these vacancies, and especially on places like Valencia Street and places like 24th Street here in Noe, where there's a lot of vacancies because these landlords, they have Prop 13, so if they've owned the place for a while, they probably don't pay much property taxes, so they can just sit on it and wait for that perfect tenant. And then also, there's just a lot of spaces that just go empty, and so it's empty space. There's no eyes on the street from an empty building. So I think that there's a frustration with that, and we may have overbuilt some space, especially in urban places, but also in some of those suburban kind of lifestyle center type places where you're trying to build shops on the bottom and housing on top, and you're trying to make it work, and the developers building in a suburban area, and they need parking and all this stuff. And maybe it should have just been housing instead of a retail space, or maybe you should have built all the retail really concentrated, so it's all kind of agglomeration. But it's something to think about, and something that I think has been argued in urbanist circles for quite a while, that we've overbuilt retail. And so an interesting thought about that. Highway expansion and climate change. The California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, claims that expanding Interstate 80 near Sacramento and adding toll lanes will reduce greenhouse gas emissions by easing congestion, but highway projects are known to induce demand from drivers, which leads critics to question whether California's highway department